happened in Ward 17 at St. Jude's Hospital. My name is Dr. Banda Jan, and I'm going to share my own experience with the ghostly events that happened in that hospital ward. It started on a dark and stormy night when I had to do an urgent surgery in Ward 17. People said the ward was haunted, but I was too busy trying to save lives to listen to those stories. Walking down the dime halls, I felt nervous, but I told myself it was just because of the surgery I was about to do. The patient, Mr. Thompson, was waiting for me, and his life was in danger. The surgery was tough, and I had to be very careful. But right when I started, weird things began to happen. The lights kept turning on and off, our equipment didn't work right, and a freezing wind made me shiver. I tried to stay calm and thought it was all just happening by chance. But as I kept working, things felt more and more creepy. I felt like someone was watching me, and once, I even thought I saw a shadow moving in the room. The nurses looked scared too, but nobody said anything. Even with all these problems, I finished the surgery and Mr. Thompson was okay. But that was just the start of the scary things that kept happening in Ward 17. Lights going out, machines breaking down, and patients seeing strange things at night. I wanted to find out what was really going on, so I looked into the hospital's past and found out some scary things about Ward 17. A long time ago, they used to try new treatments there, and often things went wrong. Patients would go missing, and people started to think the ward was cursed. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I wanted to know the truth about Ward 17. So, I decided to stay there all night. With just a flashlight, I walked through the quiet halls at midnight. The place felt spooky, and every sound made me jump. As I went further into the ward, it felt like something bad was there with me, something that liked to scare people. I saw shadows moving and heard voices that made me really scared, but I kept going because I was curious and a little bit scared too. Then, I saw a ghost. It looked like a patient and seemed so sad, like it wanted to tell me something important. That's when I understood what was happening in Ward 17. The ghosts of people who had bad things happen to them, they were stuck, looking for peace. One of them was Dr. Montgomery, the doctor who did those bad things. He was the reason for all the scary stuff, and I knew I had to talk to him to stop it. I talked to Dr. Montgomery's ghost, trying to be kind and forgiving. It was really scary and sad, but finally, he found peace, and the scary things in Ward 17 stopped. After that night, I felt different. I had been brave and learned a lot about life and death. The story of Ward 17 became a lesson for everyone at the hospital about what can go wrong when someone has too much power and how being kind can make even the darkest places better. Once upon a time in a quiet town, there was a special clinic. This clinic had a rule. Patients needed someone with them all day and night in case something happened. This story is about a strange night at the clinic that changed our lives. My mom was 90 years old, and she got very sick with pancreatic cancer, so she had to stay in the clinic. My brother Sonny decided to stay with her at night. It was during one of these nights that something unusual happened. Sonny was tired from staying awake, so he fell asleep in a chair next to Mom's bed. Across the room, my other brother Karj was also asleep. Everything was quiet until Karj suddenly woke up. He saw 3 figures floating near Mom's bed. These figures were dressed in shimmering grayish clothes. Karji was scared but also curious. He had never seen anything like this before. The figures didn't say anything. They just floated there, looking peaceful. Karji watched them for a while, unsure of what to do. Then, as if they knew he was watching, they slowly glided through the wall and disappeared into another room. Karji was shocked. He woke up Sonny and told him what he saw, but by then, the figures were gone. Neither Sonny nor Mom saw them that night. A few days later, Mom passed away. It was a sad time for our family, but something strange happened during her burial. Mom was buried on May 13, 2017, which would have been her 92nd birthday. We couldn't help but think about those figures Carlos saw that night. Were they trying to tell us something? Even now, we still wonder about them. We don't know if we'll ever see them again, but that night, made us believe that there are mysterious things in this world we may never understand. I worked in the baby delivery area of a hospital run by a charity. When I started, 2 experienced workers, Mary and Bess, told me spooky stories about Sister Mary Margaret, a strict nun who used to work there. They said her spirit was still around. I didn't believe in ghosts, so I thought they were just trying to scare me. But then, at night, I started hearing strange noises that sounded like someone walking in surgical shoe covers. I tried to find out who was making the noises, but the halls were always empty. Weird things kept happening, and even the new people Mary and Bess trained felt it. Once, a medical tool flew through the air by itself, and we were all scared. I didn't believe in ghosts, but seeing how afraid they were made me start to wonder. Everything changed one night at 2:30 a.m. I was putting things away in the surgery room, something I'd done many times. But this time, the room felt different. The machines that keep blankets and fluids warm for patients seemed to be watching over the place. I left my card outside, and the usually annoying bright lights started to flicker, making scary shadows move on the walls. Suddenly, I got really cold, heard a whisper, and felt like someone was there with me. After that, the main character might see more strange things, like tools moving by themselves, a ghostly shape in the mirror that disappears when you look straight at it, and a chilly wind that smells like old hospital cleaner following them around. These things make the hospital feel even spookier. In the surgery rooms, which were usually dark, I moved around without turning on the bright lights. The machines that warm up blankets and fluids normally made the air hot and dry. But that night, when I opened one, I felt cold instead of warm. It was strange, like the machine was cold when it should have been hot. I checked to make sure it was working right, and it was. Suddenly, I felt really nervous and saw something scary. A dark fog up on the ceiling that looked like it shouldn't be there. It wasn't the ghost of Sister Mary Margaret. This felt more evil. The fog started to move towards me, and without thinking, I said the Lord's Prayer out loud. I couldn't believe it, but the fog pulled back and disappeared as I finished the prayer. I looked again, and the machine was back to normal, giving off heat. I was too scared to stay and think about what happened, so I ran to where the nurses were. I kept what happened a secret until now. My father had a pretty serious stroke back in 2007, was unconscious for about 2 weeks, and spent a total of almost 3 months in the hospital. I used to visit him every day from morning until night. We didn't have any insurance at the time, so he had to stay in a ward with up to 7 other patients at a time, although usually it was 3 to 4 patients. One of the patients was a man in his mid to late 60s. He was a very kind man whose bed was directly in front of my father's. One day I came back from a quick lunch break, only to find my father sleeping, and there was nothing on the TV for me to watch. I was bored and sort of zoned out, staring in the general direction of the elderly patient in front of me, who happened to be getting a visit from his kids and grandchildren. As I was zoned out, I started to notice something floating above this man. I looked up and saw 3 shadowy figures floating in a circular pattern around him. They looked like 3 people wearing dark cloaks but with no hands or feet, and seemed to be diving in and out of a hole I couldn't see. One moment they would disappear into the hole, and the next they would pop right back out. I sat there stunned as I watched this, and that's when one of them broke off from the 3 and floated in my direction. It got right in my face, and I just backed my head as far back as I could in the chair I was sitting in. After that, it floated back to the other 3, and then they all went out the back wall and disappeared. I had the most sickening feeling that this man was going to die. I just knew that these things were there because he wasn't going to make it. The elderly patient had been fine the whole time I had known him, but later that night he started complaining about stomach pains. The next day he was moved to the private room next to ours, and the day after that, I ran into his daughter who was crying her eyes out. Knowing the answer, I asked her, "What's wrong?" She said, "My father died today. He was fine, and then he just got sicker and died. We still don't know what happened." I felt so sad for her and that lovely family, but there was no point in telling her what I saw so I kept it to myself. In the heart of the Midwest, nestled among the bustling city streets, there was a place that stood as a sanctuary for those grappling with the mysteries of their own minds. It was here, at the Green Meadows Mental Health Facility, where I began my journey as a psychiatric nurse. Among the many souls I encountered, one stood out, a man whose silence was as profound as his presence. His name was Roan, a towering figure, almost 7 feet tall, with eyes that held stories untold. He was known as an elective mute, a person who chooses silence over speech, and yet no medical reason could explain his quietude. Roan had lived a life that many would consider ordinary, growing up in the Deep South, until at 19, he donned the uniform of a soldier. But then, one fateful night, Roan disappeared without a trace. Declared AWOL and eventually presumed dead, the world moved on without him. A decade passed, and then, as if stepping out of a time capsule, a 7-foot-tall man walked into a hospital emergency room. "My name is Roan," he declared, "and I've been dead for 10 years. These words, spoken with clarity and conviction, were the last he ever uttered. Covered in a layer of dust, wearing the same clothes from the night he vanished, Roan was a mystery reawakened. His identity, confirmed by fingerprints, brought more questions than answers. His family, having mourned and moved on, refused to accept this apparition from their past. At Green Meadows, Roan became a fixture, pacing endlessly, his lips moving in silent conversation. Occasionally, he would throw his head back, mouth agape, as if caught in the throes of silent laughter. Medications and therapies were attempted, but none could penetrate the enigma that was Roan. On my final day at Green Meadows, I watched Roan from a distance, pacing in the parking lot, his silent laughter echoing in my memory. As I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder if Roan was truly a man, or perhaps a specter, a ghost of a life once lived. Even now, years later, the mystery of Roan remains unsolved, a haunting melody in the symphony of the human experience. This tale, my friends, is a reminder that sometimes the most profound stories are those left unspoken, and the silence can be as telling as the spoken word.